Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Friends of Mortgage Heroes. I'm Andy, and I am very excited today because I have a very dear friend of mine, my personal friend, Sara Vladic here. Huntley, I should say. Sara Huntley. Ben is here as well, Sara's husband, but I know her as Sara Vladic, and you all don't know that you know Sara, but for every single episode we've recorded here at our office, you've seen this book right here, the USS Indianapolis story by Lynn Vincent and Sara Vladic. So I am so excited to have Sara here today to talk about not only this book, but the road that brought her into authoring this story, having rights to this story. And it's a really important military story. So we're going to talk all about that today and your life as an author. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Thanks for being here, by the way.
It's really fun to be here. Thank you.
You've been around a lot of scenes and scenarios like this with cameras and crew and people. Well, much bigger than this. This is just our little studio office, but I'm so excited to have you here because you are familiar with this space, and I want to kind of start there and put some context for people. Why is it you know so much about Hollywood, Sara? Tell me about some of the cool things you've done in the entertainment world.
It's taken a long time. It wasn't, overnight success was about 30 years long. And so I got into it. I mean, I was interested in film and television, and I knew I wanted to make movies since I was 6. And so I watched my dad watching the movie Platoon, and he started crying. And my dad, very Serbian, very, stoic, was like, if I can make that man cry, I want that power.
It was a power play. Okay.
It was a power play, very Serbian, And so I was like, movies can make adult, very formal men bring them to tears. That's what they can do with emotion and storytelling. And I loved that. I didn't know what that meant at 6. I was like, this is rad. Okay. And so flash forward, I knew I wanted to go to film school. Both my parents wanted me to be a doctor. So I went to Pepperdine on a pre-med scholarship and knowing full well the second I got in, I would be studying film and television.
So that's where this picks up, and we met each other at Pepperdine. But it was actually there that in our friendship as it was beginning, I learned that you actually knew my father because he was the assistant principal at the middle school you went to. We found this out when we were in our, I don't know, how old were you, 19 or 20?
Yeah.
I found out that you went to Rancho Bernardo Middle School. At the same time, my dad worked there. So that was a funny...
And Mr. Cruz was one of my favorites, of course. And so...
Well, so I want to pick up there. So we meet in college. You had been an athlete in high school. You were on the swimming and diving team. And we're going somewhere with this.
Yes.
So you were in the swimming and diving team. And then at Pepperdine, you were also on the swimming and diving team. But there was a unique opportunity that presented itself to you back right before college. I would love for you to tell everyone what that was.
So again, I wanted to work in movies, and, they needed stunt people for this small film. I knew a little bit about, not much actually, and I just wanted to be a stunt person. Was not a professional stunt person at the time, but I was a nationally ranked diver, and they needed people to jump off high things off this, boat people might have heard of called Titanic. So I actually didn't tell my mom. I told my diving coach, and I would go down. I wasn't even 18 yet, and we would go down to Ensenada and film. And so I started doing stunts, and I was a stunt person on Titanic, and ended up doing stunts in college too for Baywatch. And so
for people who aren't picking up the obvious, or if it's super obvious, I hope it's super obvious. There are stunt scenes in Titanic that you think are being done by the main actors, and they're not. They're being done by Sara. So there's several scenes in the movie where you think you see Kate Winslet doing something, and it's not her. It's actually Sara. And then Baywatch. I forgot about the Baywatch thing because it was right there in Malibu. So that makes sense.
Right there. So I would do my homework sitting on the beach, and they'd call me up and be like, "We need you to dive off this speedboat," and I would do it in this tiny red Speedo that would barely stay on, which is way more information than anyone needs to know. But
we're leaving that in the show. Yeah.
Great. And so I did Baywatch. I did the Truman Show. I did a bunch of things, but honestly, I just wanted to be on set. I used my diving and everything to have that, open that door, but that was my window into getting to work on Hollywood.
Yeah. And you've done some really cool things in Hollywood. I know you used to work on the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards for many years with Mel, right?
Yeah.
And then I know you had I would say a pretty critical part in a little known movie that Bruce Willis was in called
The Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense, with M. Night Shyamalan. So why don't you tell everyone real quick the context of that?
Well, the truth is he'll probably never, ever admit this, but all of us know what happened, at the writing table and is that ending was not his idea. It was the interns.
It was the interns. So the story is Sarah's at the writing table as an intern on this movie with them, and the idea comes up that in the end of the movie, Bruce Willis should have lived his entire existence in the arc of the movie story, having been dead, and you find out at the end, and that was your idea.
Yeah.
So here's the funny thing. At least it's funny to me. Like there are so many people that don't. That aren't like the name and lights in Hollywood, but they do really critical things. And it's true so much in a lot of military history as well. And the reason I wanted to kind of set that platform of all of this is specifically because of the Indianapolis story and your involvement. There are a lot of, I'll say, unsung heroes. There were some villains made out of this entire naval experience about the Indianapolis. And I want to make sure we give the proper amount of time to really honor the story of the Indianapolis and the survivors and also those that were lost at sea. So I want to start first by talking about how did you first learn about the Indianapolis story, and then what piqued your interest and go, oh man, this is something big here.
Yeah, well, actually around 13 was the first time I heard about it. Again, I was watching a documentary with my dad. We watched a lot of equivalent kind of the History Channel now, but we'd watch old documentaries, and they had this line in the movie that said, this was the ship that carried the bomb and ended the war, and it sunk. And that was it. Like one line that summed up this part. I was like, wait, what? It ended the war. And it also was the end of the documentary. Like that's it. No context. So this was before internet, because we're old.
Yeah, we're old. That is how old we are. Yeah, thank you. That's good.
And so I went to the library, and there was nothing about it in the library. And I went to, tried to find as much as I could. Couldn't find really anything about it yet. And so I thought, well, this is a really cool story. Maybe someone will make a movie about this someday. Never had any idea that it would be me. Flash forward to when we're in college, and I started thinking about what am I going to do now? Lots of cool opportunities were coming with graduation. I was like, well, what do I want to do? Well, no one's made Indianapolis yet. I'm going to make it. And as every 20, 21-year-old believes, they're just going to come right out of college and make a $200 million movie as their first project.
Yeah. 200 million 20 years ago.
Yes,
exactly. 25 years ago almost.
10, what are you talking about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. 200 million back then, like $1 billion now.
Yes. So I thought, no big deal. So, but I did realize, which is what is missing from Hollywood, I think, and most times, is that I wanted to tell the story from the people who lived it, their perspective. And I thought the only way I can do this is by actually talking to them. And so I started looking for survivors. And by then, Ask Jeeves was invented.
Oh my gosh. When's the last time you've heard of Ask Jeeves? Ben, Jen, anybody, either of you, Ask Jeeves in the last 15 years, 18 years? No, neither? Me neither.
Yeah.
I forgot. Honestly, right now, until you said Ask Jeeves, I was like, I forgot that was a thing.
It was a thing indeed. And it found me the USS Indianapolis Survivors Organization. So I reached out. I found the chairman was a survivor, and his name is Paul Murphy, and his wife was the secretary. And they said, well, why don't you come to a reunion? And that was right after we graduated from Pepperdine. So that July after graduation, I was dirt poor. I'm like, I'm going to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I met these guys.
That's so crazy to me. But it's not, I guess what I'm saying, sorry, I said that and I'm like, wait a minute, it's not crazy. You're young, you're enthusiastic, you're optimistic. You're like, yeah, sure, why not? What do I have to lose? So I mean, it makes sense as I replay that in my head right now. But you also didn't know the depth of the story yet. So
no.
What were you just hope and a prayer? Oh, there's to be something here.
There was so much God involved in this. I can't from the onset, the idea to how it was planted to the execution to every step along the way when I shouldn't have been able to have access, when I shouldn't have been able, there's stories that we'd probably have to do 5 episodes to do all the God stories involved, but so many things happened in order for me to be a part of this, to get me there. And I went into it with an absolute awe of these men, what they had done. I didn't know the depth of the story at that time at all, but I knew they were heroes. Mm-hmm. I knew they were incredible. And to me, they were more important than the celebrities on the posters. These were the people I wanted to look up to, what they did, what the sacrifices they made as teenagers. A lot of them were my age at that point, or
Well,
that came out wrong.
Back then you're just exiting college, you're in your young 20s, but some of these guys were 18 years old. Some of them lied because they weren't 18 yet. They said they were, exactly. And then we'll get to the whole story about the whole ship itself, but you're meeting these guys at the survivors reunion. This is in what, the early 2000s?
Yeah, 2001.
Yeah. And, at that point, this has already happened 60 years prior. Well, almost 60 years prior, right? Yeah. And so they're getting up there in age.
Exactly. And so, they looked at it as like, first of all, it was a young girl who was interested. Usually it's like young boys are interested in war stories or that kind of narrative. And even, when you see who writes history books, it's not generally women. And so I think that they were just absolutely fascinated and, took me in like a granddaughter. And so that's kind of, I went to one reunion and they're like, well, come back. And then I was like, well, I want to do interviews and all these things. And I didn't quite know what that meant yet either. Like I knew how to use a camera because at college, because you know everything when you get out of college. And I saved, I worked in a corporate communications job and paid the bills that way. And every time I had money, I was like saving it to go do these interviews. So 2005 comes around. Well, actually right prior to that, like 2003, 2004, the guys said they had a committee. And they said, well, let's meet in Vegas because it was kind of central to where we all lived. And so that we went to Denny's on the Strip and they said, we want you to be our storyteller. And I will never forget that Denny's or that, opportunity. And I was like, yes, like I will tell your story. And I still thought it would be a movie at that point. But it was just this, like, you want me to be your storyteller. And so... And I swore that I would tell the story till the day I die and to keep it alive and their legacy ongoing. And so with that, I had saved the money and went to Indianapolis and we started filming the first interviews in 2005. So 20 years ago, started filming the first interviews. And over the next 10 years, like I met Ben, we got married, like he learned how to be a camera guy. Yeah. And that became our marriage. Ben became
your crewman on
became my crew.
Every survivor's reunion. Yeah.
And like,
hey Ben, good job, man.
You did a good job. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Ben's actually behind the camera right now. I don't know if you're touching anything or not, but you're doing great back there, Ben.
So yeah, Ben got involved and we travel every time, we could. His mom's joke for a long time was if we could rub two nickels together, we would use them to buy pay for indie footage. Yeah. And so we did the interviews and interviewed over 100. I think it was 107 of survivors. And then families of lost at sea. That was really important to me because no one had ever talked to those that didn't, had family members who didn't come home. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we were talking to them and I still, at this point, still fighting to get a movie made. Like, no idea. I didn't even have a documentary in mind. I just wanted the footage to do the interviews or to write the screenplay. But another God story is that he's like, he had it on my heart and I don't know how to explain it other than I knew the setup I wanted to film these interviews. And I mean, when you think about it, if you have no intention to use these other than to watch and to have this information recorded, you're not setting up a background in a way. You're not doing all these things, but it worked out that we had the same backdrop for every single one. And you have to remember, HD didn't exist. 4K didn't exist.
Right.
So I started with SD and Betacam and went all the way through 4K by the time I was done. Yeah. And because of the way this was set up and because of the high quality that we used from the beginning, it matched. Yeah. So it looked like we filmed it all at the same time. Yeah. So I had all this and I had 170 hours of footage and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do with this? Yeah. Hence the documentary. Yeah. And so... Yeah.
Well, so tell people right now that don't know, first of all, they're probably learning for the first time, there's a documentary. So yes, there's a documentary, which is the telling of the story from the survivors themselves as captured by Sarah and then Sarah and Ben.
Yeah, and Melanie.
Melanie, yes. Melanie, too, yeah. So where can people access that? We'll put the link in the description box, but where's the easiest place for people to access that to watch it when they want to?
You can watch it on Prime for free. I make 12 cents every time someone watches.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. Yes. That's 2 nickels and 2 pennies.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
That's almost double than what we started with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 4 coins. All right, so you make 12 cents. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. Yes. But what was it like having that experience of like listening to this survivor story? Because again, you're only talking to people who had survived. I want to ask you that, and then I want to go back and actually tell people who don't know like what actually happened. Like what's the story of Indianapolis? But we're at the survivors. What was it like to like listen to them recount their lived experience on a sinking ship in the middle of the ocean and being lost?
A lot of them wouldn't talk at the beginning. You know, that took years to actually foster that relationship and to get them to tell the whole story. When I started in 2005, you know, I by then had studied the story a lot, but still being with them and learning the stories more. And then as they got to know me more and they got to trust me more, they would open up a lot. And so many times, you know, the families would generally be behind camera with me. And they said, my dad would never, ever have said that before. I've never heard that before. And I think it was because it was very much like this, you know, conversation style. It wasn't a camera in your face and asking. A lot of times people ask questions, they don't really understand the story. So I, like, through listening to them, got to know the story and knew what to ask. And so, you know, there were times where one survivor in particular by the name of John Woolston is an officer. He was an ensign and he had only been on the ship for a couple of weeks. And John was a brilliant, brilliant man. MIT, you know, he went on to design the Thresher submarine, which unfortunately was another tragedy. But that being said, you know, John, very stoic, very like MIT brain, right? I was fine. Everything compartmentalized, you know. He broke down in those interviews and I'm crying and he's crying. And then we were supposed to go out to dinner afterward. And he's like, I'm just going to stay home and drink wine, you know?
Wow.
And so things like that over and over would be happening with the guys. And I would learn more and more. And they would always talk about their shipmates. It was not them and their tragedy or their victim. There was no victim like mentality whatsoever. It was that I don't think I deserve to live. How come my friend didn't?
It was like survivor guilt?
Yes. Oh,
dang.
Over and over.
Wow.
And,
well, okay. Well, hold on. So let's, because I don't remember the numbers, put the numbers. 317 men survived, right? How many are estimated to have passed? Because I know there was two numbers when I was reading. There's two numbers. There's the 823 and 825?
No. So, and we ended up figuring out that number, but there were 879 men that died on the ship. 1,195 went to sea. And I'll get into, you know, the story, but one guy got off the ship right before she sailed, and that was the discrepancy. And so we figured out what that was, and for his story, the Navy sent him the mother, the telegram saying your son has died, and she's like, he's sitting on the sofa next to me. So he actually didn't end up going, or he got sent home to go to radio school and was not on the ship. But because all the records went down with the ship, they thought he was lost.
Assumed he was still on the ship and was one that was lost because he wasn't recovered.
Right.
Wow.
And then they kept him on the survivor list. So then it bumped both numbers up and it just became this record, you know, confusion for years.
So that's why I spouted out the 317. So it's actually 316.
316.
It's 316 survived. Okay.
Yes.
So out of 1,195, 316 survived.
1 out of 4 survived.
So, and most people don't know that this is the Navy's greatest tragedy at sea ever. Well, or any, we have recorded history of any at sea tragedy. So, you know, and I feel both ways about this because, you know, we don't talk about it. You know, we talk to lots of people in the military and they see the book. Oh, what's that about? And I, you know, try to give them a little bit of insight. Like, you know, my friend Sara wrote this book with Lynn Vincent and, you know, they recount the story of the survivors of the USS Indianapolis and what happened. Oh, I never heard about that. That's that ship did think, right? Like kind Jaws. As a passing comment or a passing question or Jaws. Yeah. They made a quick reference to it in Jaws, right? But it's tragic because if it was today and, you know, 800 people died or 800 more, like that would be a big deal. We'd have like a national holiday. It would be it would be way more of a memorial. And most people don't even know about this situation.
Right. I mean, granted, it was during the war. So there was a lot of death, a lot of news coming in, you know, of tragedies that were happening. So it was something that was lost in the mix. You also have to know that, again, kind of getting ahead, like you don't know the Indy story, but they weren't allowed to say that the ship sunk when it sank. It was announced to the American public the same day the end of World War II was announced. On the bottom, in the corner, was the thing, USS Indianapolis lost with 100% casualty. Now, casualty also means injured, but family doesn't know that. So they think everyone on the ship is lost. And that's the first time they heard about the news of the ship. Meanwhile, everyone's in the streets celebrating. The kissing sailor in New York, the people all over the country, that's all happening. There's parades going on everywhere. And the family learns that day their loved one's not coming home. So this is like buried from that point forward. And never was it brought to the attention and what it deserved, and what, her role in the war, USS Indianapolis's role in ending the war was, like I said, it shipped that ended the war, and no one knows about it.
Okay, let's talk about what actually happened.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the sinking of the Indianapolis. What was happening right before that? How did it get sunk? And let's talk about what's happened since then.
So, one thing to know too is Indianapolis was not just like, if you do know about it, generally you know about it sinking. You don't know that it was the ship of state. It was FDR's ship of state. It was Spruance's flagship, meaning the Pacific War was commanded from the deck of that ship. So this was a very important ship, a famous ship at that time. And then it was tasked with, so let me step back. In March of 1945, it was tasked with carrying the atomic bomb. And this was, well, I'm messing this all up, but in March, it was hit by a kamikaze plane, sent it back to the United States, and it was under repair. From there, because it was in the States, it was tasked with carrying the components of the atomic bomb. It was one of the fastest ships in the Navy, had to get across the Pacific, deliver the components to Tinian, and it was after she delivered those components that she was sunk a couple days later. And she was in the, like, smack in the middle of the Pacific, midnight. The moon comes out, just enough light to show the ship, and that's when the Japanese submarine I-58 surfaced and hit her with 2 torpedoes and blew the bow off the ship. It was like a big open maw, sucking the water in, breaking the bulkheads. Ship sinks in 12 minutes. So these guys, they're in their skivvies. It's hot. It's the middle of the summer. They're on deck. 12 minutes later, they're in the middle of the ocean. There was a signal that got out. No one received it. They don't believe there was enough power. No one knew they were missing. They knew, like, there was various mishaps in the different commands of why she went missing, and that was a huge problem later. But no one knew she was gone. So guys are swimming. They think about, like, they think 300 went down with the ship. And then the rest are in the water. So there's roughly 800 in the water. And 3 rafts get in the water. So there's like maybe 30 guys of that total in rafts. The rest are swimming, literally swimming. Some have life jackets. Some are on floater nets. Some are on flotsam or whatever they can find. Pitch black, middle of the night, 300 miles of the closest land. Oof. And they don't know that no one knows they're missing.
Right.
The suction didn't have a huge problem because the way the ship sunk and went down like this, it didn't really pull them under, but there was fuel oil in the water, and that was covering them. They couldn't breathe. They were, vomiting a lot. So their brains are starting to swell. They have hyponatremia, and this is when they're starting to hallucinate. There's also the sharks, which is what this story is famous for. So hundreds of sharks, they're in the middle of the Pacific. They start turning on each other because they're hallucinating. And after, 4 days, it's 5 nights and 4 days by the time they're spotted, which is a miracle in and of itself. Pilot just happens to spot the oil slick. He's thinking it's a Japanese submarine. He's going down for the attack, and he sees men in the water. And that's when he pulls back on the bomb drop. So no one knew they were gone. And by the time they're rescued, there's only 316. 324 actually passed away on the way to the hospital. But when they were rescued, no one still knew who they were.
Right. So I want you to tell the part about the pilot actually landing the aircraft, because they were not supposed to do that.
Right.
They're not supposed to land the aircraft, but did that basically against orders, right, and against protocol, in order to give some sort of like safety to the men that were still at sea all these days later. Right.
And so, so Chuck Gwynn is the pilot who spotted them. And then he called in for reinforcement. And another pilot by the name of Adrian Marks, who flew a PBY Catalina, he's the one who he actually saw men being taken by sharks. And Catalinas are meant to land on like a lake or, that kind of surface. These are 12-foot swells in the middle of the Pacific. So he goes against protocol, and he, and he talked to his crew, and they said, let's go. Like, there was no hesitation about the men. They all knew that they needed to rescue, and they didn't know who they were. They didn't know if they were Japanese, American. They were just like, there are hundreds of people spread out over 25 miles. And he's like, we're going to land. So he lands and he bounces. The plane fully bounces. It breaks the plane apart. It will never fly again. But they stick like pencils and cotton in the holes and keep it floating for
that's some real MacGyver stuff right there.
I mean, you had to do things during the war. So, they took care of the plane, and they ended up getting like 53 guys in the plane. They put them up on the wings and tied them down with the parachute. Cords.
Yeah.
And then they were everywhere. They were all over the inside of the plane, and they're kind of taxiing, and they have spotters telling them where guys are, but it's now getting dark. And they also knew it would take 12 hours for the closest ship to get there. So they had to keep these men alive and give them hope. So they're picking guys up. The other ships come. One of the ships, there's a mutiny on. They take the captain in his quarters, and the rest of the crew decide they're rescuing him because the captain got scared. He thought there was still enemy submarines in the water because no one knew when the attack happened. What? So this captain, he's scared. He's like, let's get out of here. And the crew's like, no, hell no, we're getting those guys out of the water. So they put him in his cabin under guard, and they rescue and they rescued like 100 and something guys.
What? That's crazy.
So all these things are happening. So you think the story's over, and then there's the rescue, and there's all these things. And they pull the guys out of the water. They get them to the hospital, and they tell them they're not allowed to tell or write home that they survived. So there's letters home from the guys that I have seen held in my hand that they pretend like they're on the ship, still on duty. Like, I wrote, honey, like, I miss you. And it's on Red Cross paper, but they act as though the ship never sank. And that's because they were ordered. They were under guard at the hospital. They weren't allowed to say anything. And it was then when they were in the hospital that the atomic bomb was, so they were rescued August 2nd. The first atomic bomb was dropped on August 6th. That's when they found out their role in carrying those components. Because the captain didn't know.
Yeah, it was the fulfillment of the bigger plan that they were a part of and pulling it all together.
But nobody on that ship knew what they were carrying. They just knew it was top secret cargo.
Right.
So they find that out. The war is over. September 15th is when it's announced in the newspaper, or September 2nd. And then the signing ceremony, but these guys are still in the hospital and not allowed to say anything. And then the telegrams start arriving, and, they still are very vague. They're like, the ship was lost. Your loved one hasn't been found. So some people thought, well, maybe they swam, but they don't know they're 300 miles from land.
Right.
So, a lot of people had this false hope, and they, trying to call the captain because the captain surviving was a big deal because a lot of people were made to believe the captain should have gone down with the ship.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that because there's an entire drama around not only him surviving, but then what happened to him after they returned. Right. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Yeah, let's kind of share that story because I know in the end he becomes vindicated, but kind of. Yeah. But it's only after he's dead.
Yes.
But I was compelled by the story of the Japanese sub-captain that came to basically testify as an ally after being a former opponent.
Yeah.
So, and an enemy. Right. So let's talk about what happened with the captain in that whole situation, because they basically thought he should have called abandoned ship and done all this other stuff. It's like, well, your ship just broke in half and your comms are down, electricity's out. You could call it all you want, but no message is going to get through.
Right.
They end up hanging that on him, right? So walk us through kind of that evolution of that story.
Yeah. So I kind of skipped over it, and then, I'll tell you the Cliff Notes version, but essentially the captain, they come back, everybody's like, how did we lose FDR's ship estate? How did we lose? Like, this is impossible. How did this happen? How did this go missing for 4 days? So they have to blame someone. They have 879 families saying, who's to blame for this, right? And so the easiest person to blame is the captain. So they're trying to get all these charges on him. They can't find anything really. The two things they come down to is failure to zigzag, which is a maneuver, especially, for evasion of torpedoes, except everybody, the Japanese, the Germans, everyone knew of zigzagging. So it was factored into what they did, their maneuvers. And then it was failure to call abandoned ship, like you said. So they, those are the two things they charge him on. And yes, he did call for a cease of zigzagging because he was told there was no threat in the water, but he still failed to zigzag. So they pinned that on him. And that's why the captain was court-martialed, and they brought the Japanese submarine captain Hashimoto in to testify against him. This is the first time an enemy is brought in to testify against one of our own during wartime. He even said in Japanese, he would have sunk the ship no matter what. It was perfect. It was lined up perfectly in the moonlight, in his, exact coming at him. It was perfect. And the translator did not translate that. He told it differently. And so essentially he tried to help the captain from one captain to another, and they didn't. They knew that they were going to find him guilty, and they did. And so later on, 50 years later, when they're exonerating him, Hashimoto actually wrote another letter to Senator Warner saying, you should not have ever done this to this man. And that, and then the efforts of Hunter Scott, who was a young boy, and Bill Tody, those three, working together with Senator Bob Smith and Senator Warner, are the reason why 50 years later, the survivors' effort to exonerate their captain actually cleared his name. But this was unfortunately long after he took his own life.
Yeah. And he was a part of the story that is told in a recorded story is that he was getting death threats from families who had lost their son.
Not death threats, but they were getting, they were sending letters like, our son is not here with us at Christmas because of you.
Yeah.
Or we're celebrating his birthday, but he's not here because of you.
Yeah.
And he would get, hundreds
guilt
of those
and
letters.
shame and
Yeah.
I was trying to paraphrase and I came with the wrong. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Try to paraphrase. No, but from the way the story reads, there was a tremendous amount of weight and heaviness felt upon him. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately for his name to be cleared is tragic. Mm-hmm. But again, this goes back to that thing where it's like, why don't we talk about this? Why is there no national federal holiday around this? We lost hundreds of men fighting during World War II, which, is an era that is talked about and is so documented and is so retold. There's so many movies and stories and miniseries and this and that. And I've said on this show too, we have our own family connection to World War II because my dad's uncle, Henry Cruz, was on the Arizona. Mm-hmm. So he was on the Arizona when it was bombed and he lived until 2012. And so when he died, he was one of, I think, 16 remaining survivors. Mm-hmm. So there's our own personal World War II connection there. And that's just on my dad's side. There's another example on my mom's side. My grandfather was on the ground in the army in Germany.
Oh, and
so anyways, there's so much history around so much of World War II. It's just so sad to me that the memory of the people of the U.S. Indianapolis is really upheld by only a couple of efforts. One is the survivors organization, which now there's only one survivor left, I think, right?
One left.
There's your book. There's the book, only 317 survived. It's called 317, but it's 316, right?
Yeah.
Which I think you gave me a copy of that. Yep. I have a copy of your book. And then you guys have your documentary of all these men telling their story so that, after they're not here, their experience is still being told.
Yeah. Well, and there's an organization that's that took over for the Indianapolis survivors, which is called the Legacy Organization. And that's the families that are still continuing, and they're going to schools. They're doing, using the documentary and the book to go to schools and to talk to the next generation. And it's really cool to see that Gen Z is actually really fascinated with this and respects it. They are learning from it. They want to know about it. There's this new drive and interest in that era. And so I'm really happy about that because hopefully, you're seeing a lot of things turning the way the world is going right now. And this next generation is really going to be the one called to fight, to stand up for what's right. Yeah. And they're thankfully looking to the greatest generation for, guidance, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that inspiration. Mm-hmm. I know, again, personally, I know this, but you faced a lot of resistance to making this into something in Hollywood, whether it's a mini series, kind of like Band of Brothers, or if it's an actual like because from what I recall, most people just want to tell it as a sunken ship shark story. Yeah. Versus like honoring and respecting like the legacy of the people who really, the men who served on the ship and then what they were doing and then how it all translated and all that. So like, what are some of the if you can, share some of like the absurdities you've heard around the way people wanted to tell the story, but have been unsuccessful in doing so because of the way you have the survivor's story protected.
Yeah. And I mean, that has been a battle from the beginning of fighting. You know, I secured the rights back in 2005 to tell their story. And my promise was that I would keep the integrity of this story. And the offers that have come in from, you name it, the biggest directors from J.J. Abrams to Chris Columbus to all these people along the way, but they're like, oh, you want to be attached? You're going to be on it to prompt, like a quality control person. We want nothing to do with it. That happens time and time again where there are a few people on earth that know the story as well as I do after all these interviews and years of spending, researching it and working with the legacy group and the survivors and whatnot. But they seem to not want that responsibility of telling it, adhering to the truth. And the crazy thing is you don't have to make anything up in this story. Like we just told you the snippets of it.
That's the fascinating part to me is like, why is it that you have to like control the story? The story has all the drama and all the theatrics you need for it to be I'll say blockbuster for lack of a better explanation.
Yeah.
But that's really what they're trying to do. They want to make a blockbuster. They want it to be some big hit. And I understand that. But but at the same time, like you don't have to like add in anything. It's got it all.
In fact, there's too much. Like you have to pick what you can't to fit it in.
Well, we're doing that right now.
Hours.
There's a bunch of stuff we're not talking about right now about the story. But that's kind of my point though, is like even in that is there's things that just they get left out because you just can't tell it all in an amount of time that someone's going to sit through a movie unless you're going to do like, Lord of the Rings style, do like 19 movies, 3 hours a piece, right? You spend 4 days just sitting on your couch watching this straight.
Watching the boat move.
4 more hours of the boat moving.
Like Robert Redford, make it beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been interesting. And, you asked about some of the crazy stories. I won't tell you the director's name, but everybody knows this director. Like everybody knows this director. And no, it's not Steven Spielberg. But this director called and he said, I want to make Indianapolis. Like, I'm serious about this. I want to make it. But I want to do it with vampires.
Oh my God, I forgot that. I forgot that.
And I wish I could have had a screenshot of my face.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible. That is super terrible.
And I thought he was joking, because absurdly, no one would suggest that to tell such an important story with vampires. But then Abraham Lincoln. Vampire.
Okay, but wait a minute. There's a version of this somehow that's like a Nicolas Cage movie, right? Or Nicolas Cage is in it?
And you can't get those 2 hours back of your life.
Okay, I understand. Yes, I understand it's not a good movie. I get that part. How can they? So people can still write about it, right? But they're not going to be able to have kind of the official account because you've secured that.
Right. The official names of the crew members. I mean, they can use the captain. He's a public figure. They can tell the Navy story itself is public record. They can tell it, but they can't tell the individual personal stories. And furthermore, most people haven't taken the time to learn them.
Well, you've done this for over a decade.
Yeah, 2.
So, I mean, he had 170 hours of personal interviews.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how long the documentary is. Sorry, you condense that to like an hour and a half?
Yeah, it's an hour 98.
That's so crazy.
So yeah, it needs to be told, but it needs to be told the right way. And I don't know why. I mean, there's, all these different theories of why, but part of me believes that like there's one survivor left. And knowing these guys and knowing like, yes, they want their story as a movie, but I don't know if I could imagine living through the worst hell of my life on the big screen. And maybe they're not supposed to be here for it. Maybe it's supposed to be after they're here. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know the timing. I know that I'm meant to do it. Every time I try to quit, God's like, no, you're going to do this. And so it's still part of the plan.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot of money and the right person who believes in the integrity of the story. And it will be one of those movies that, it's like the Titanic or the Gladiator or, those kind of things.
And the other thing, and I'll mention this just as a personal thing, like what's super important to me about this is that this isn't some attempt to revise the historical account. Where in a lot of other stuff in Hollywood, it's like, oh, we want to change this and he should be like this or she should be like that or infiltrate these other aspects of their life that weren't actually part of their life. And I appreciate how even in the exposure that you've given Jen and myself to this, beyond the book and all that, and watching the documentary is just there's so many stories you've told us about, these people, and they're worth telling. And I think it's important to tell because, again, like I was saying earlier, we tell so much stuff about other parts of World War II and other like conflicts that we've been a part of. Like this thing being missing as like an arc to the story is super crazy to me.
Right. And I'll even add to the fact that like the Nicolas Cage film that they tried to tell, it's like a shark version of the story. They made up like more than half of that movie is fabricated storyline in a sense of they made the captain of the Japanese submarine Hashimoto and McVeigh meet and like hug at the end, like things that never happened in history. To your point, like to make it cinematic stuff, like they added narrative in that never ever happened. They made, unfortunately at the time they made, certain ethnicities were not allowed to be in officers' positions, and they made them in those positions. They put them in those positions. And to me, that's a disservice because we can't learn from things if we don't know what we did wrong before. And so, you take these things out, or you put it in different context, or you change history. You don't understand the value of it. You don't understand how to learn from it. You don't repeat it again, And so I that's what has been super important about this is like, we don't need to fabricate anything. We need to tell the truth, good, bad, ugly, everything in between, and use it to be better in the future, to not repeat that.
So if it was up to you to like decide we're going to have a USS Indianapolis recognition day, what day would it be?
Well, it'd be July 30th.
It'd be July 30th? Okay.
It would be, and sadly the day, the ship was lost, but it's the most recognized day for it. And then, I think that, the final crew all came on the ship in July. That was, they set sail, their mission was completed in July. So all those things were really July of 1945 would be probably the most recognizable day for this ship.
And are you allowed to talk about like the attempts or lack of attempts to try to recover the ship and the components of it and all that? Are you,
yeah, well, no.
Liberty to share some of those things?
I look at Ben like, we know where the ship is and we will never tell.
Technical support, what does technical say? Off-camera tech says we are not telling.
Yeah. Technical support was very helpful.
Sorry, there will be no latitude, longitudinal coordinates right now.
Sorry. But finding the ship was actually a super interesting story because, there'd been many attempts to this. And finally in 2017, I got a call, and I love telling the story because I always thought I was more important than I really was. So I had just bought a Microsoft computer, like actual Microsoft computer. And like a few hours later, I get a call from a guy named Paul Allen. Oh, and geez. I was like,
okay,
wow, I bought a Microsoft computer and Paul Allen's calling. Not at all about my computer.
He doesn't give a damn about your computer.
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. But, Paul Allen's like, and honestly, when he said he was Paul Allen, I was like, okay.
Hi, I'm Sara. Nice to meet you.
Why, who gave you my number? And, I am of zero importance, but this guy named Paul Allen's like, yeah, I'm going to fund an expedition to find Indianapolis. And I was like, okay. Because we'd heard it before. We'd heard it a lot of times before. Okay. And, Bob Ballard, who found Titanic, was looking for it. There were several other groups that, funded, were looking for it, couldn't find it. And, it's, like 4 miles down, Ben? Something like that? It's near the Marianas Trench, and so which is the deepest part of any ocean in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So Paul Allen calls, and he's like, we're going to find Indy. And I'm like, okay, well, let me know. And flash forward, so in the middle of the night, it's like 3 a.m, and I get a call from the Navy, my friend in the Navy. They found the ship. You have 3 hours to prepare and call all the survivors and any lost at sea families you can before we go public.
3 hours. So you get this call at 3 a.m, and they say you have 3 hours to do this?
Yes. And I had to, which I had no experience doing this whatsoever. I had to build a website because I needed to have a landing place to tell the press to go. So I built a web page and called the survivors and told them, because you have to do that with care. You can't just be like, yo.
Sure.
So
because look at the dichotomy of what you shared before. Like when the ship was finally, when they admitted that it was sunk, it was like bottom right corner after all the other stuff. So it was like kind of a side piece. Hopefully it was overlooked and overshadowed by everything else. And then now to be like thrust into the front of, hey, massive major historical news being made right now.
Right this second. And the guys, they weren't allowed to talk about it when they came home. So they had this built-in, like, I'm not going to tell, like, and that generation didn't talk about what they went through either. So, you have all this time of not talking about it. Some of them barely are talking about it. And then this news story hits. But, I'm calling them and telling them they found your ship. They finally know the final resting place of 3/4 of your crew. And John Woolston lives in Hawaii and it's like 3 hours the opposite direction. He's like, why the hell are you calling us?
So, like, it's midnight, right?
Exactly. And he's like 91 at this time. So, it's just, and the reactions were so mixed. I mean, there was reverence, but there was also the jokes. And I think they'd learned to deal with what they'd went through with jokes. So, can I get my money sock? It's in my locker. I'm like, no. No, Sam Lopez, you cannot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
And then there's the fear of what's going to happen. Like, okay, someone knows where it is. But I will say that the Navy, History and Heritage Command, and the crew that worked the Petrel, found the ship, were so respectful. They put out a whole bunch of dummy coordinates so that they would know, because they trusted a few people, two of which were Ben and myself, who had the blueprints of the ship. And so we were helping them figure out what they were identifying when they saw pieces of the ship.
Right. Validating that what they found is actually the
This ship. Is this gun. Oh, this is this.
Yeah.
The whatever gun, that kind of thing, the 8-inch gun. And so they were sending out these bogus coordinates on these images we were getting to see if they got leaked, they would know who did it. And so.
Oh, what? Yeah. Bait?
Yeah.
You're putting out bait?
They put out bait.
Oh, man.
And so we were very good. We didn't share with anyone.
Hold on a second. Ben, you have a big smirk on your face. Was that your idea? No, that was the Navy's idea?
Yeah.
All right.
So we, calling the families and then beyond that, calling the lost at sea families, because of course that's the final resting place of their loved one. So getting to tell them that, and it was so emotional. There was a lot of crying, a lot of, more so than the survivors. The survivors were reverent, like I said, and quiet, except for a few that made the jokes. But overall, it was just like, how is this going to be handled? And this fear that it's going to become like Titanic, where it's like desecrated. But again, you can't just go to this ship. You can't, that roughly 4 miles down, you can't just go to the ship. And the Navy has now classified it with an extra level of security that no one knows these coordinates. No one will know these coordinates. No one will be given permission to dive on this without going through the Navy. And again, you have to have this phenomenal equipment and things to go that deep. So it wouldn't be like some pirate kind of thing could go down and take pieces of it.
Yeah, you're talking about the most advanced equipment to not only get to the place, but then to get to the place and then recover it without breaking stuff and actually safely bringing it back on board to something else. This isn't a little boat.
Right.
It's a massive.
It's 610 feet long.
Yeah, there's a massive ship.
In pieces, but
sure, it's been down there for 80 years at this point.
But it's so deep, it's pristine. It looks like it could rise up and go again. It's because it's so dark and so cold down there that it's just so preserved. But
this is the crazy part of me. The crazy part to me, though, is your involvement in the Titanic, which is the ship sinking at sea, and then your personal interest in the USS Indianapolis, and then being on this quest to preserve the survivor's story, to then finding the ship's coordinates and being part of telling everyone that they found the ship that was sunk. These ships at the bottom of the sea, Sarah. Do you care about anything else in your life other than ships at the bottom of the sea?
I have an amazing husband and a great dog and a cool family, so I'm good. And then boats.
Yeah, your life theme seems to be people jumping off ships and ships sinking.
I didn't put that together today.
Not to make light of it, but you're doing stunts on the Titanic set, and then you're literally talking to people who were recovered out of the water and have lived these, I'll say, long and I'm going to say fulfilled lives as much as they could, but I understand the internalization of that and them not talking about it because they're kind of ordered to, but then just emotionally not wanting to talk about it.
Well, yeah.
People did that after Vietnam and after the Korean War and after, Desert Storm and even the most recent conflicts too. It's guys don't want to come back and talk about stuff like that.
I feel like the guys that really went, and guys and women, I guess now too, but those who really faced combat don't want to talk about it. It's the ones that sat in a safe base far away that are oh, the tragedy, they're the victim mentality more so. But the guys, I feel like anyone who really witnessed or experienced combat and war don't come home and, want to blast them.
Yeah. They're not just calling a town meeting. Hey, everybody come around. Let me tell you all my stories. Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. What would you want to see next regarding the Indianapolis story? So, but by the way, there's the survivors, story itself, of the handwritten account of all the survivors retelling it by by their own writing, their personal firsthand experience.
Yep.
There's the documentary footage you have, and then there's this book as well. What do you want to see happen ultimately with this? Like, where do you think the conclusion of all this is? Is it a major motion picture? Is it a Band of Brothers style kind of show? Like, what do you want to do?
It's a series. Like we talked about over and over, you can't fit it all. There's no way to do the story justice in a 2-hour movie, as much as it'd be great on the big screen. Between the legacy of the ship, between the sinking of the ship, between the captain and what happened to him, that's 3 movies. So the only way it can really be told and the way it should be told is through a series.
Yeah. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
And is there anything, so I have another topic I want to talk about today still, but is there anything else about this that like you think is notable or an encouragement, a word of encouragement with people who don't know about this that you'd want to share? Like, because it's having known you for so long, and Jen and myself spending a lot of time with you and Ben, like it's obviously made a profound impact on your personal life. And then also your life as a married couple too. I mean, you've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours doing research, documentation, citation, like validating and verifying stuff you found or that have been sent to you that you have to, this is true, this is not, this corroborates, this doesn't. So, what is that when you take a second, you like think back about that? Like, what do you want other people to know about this that is just so important?
I think on a more personal level, like what this taught me was that everyone has a story, and especially our veterans have a story. And if you sit down and take 5 minutes to listen to that story, it could change your life. We have so many people that have contributed, not just veterans, but also, service, police, fire, those kind of things. Like you see them, they're just sitting there at the store. Like my favorite thing to do at Costco, if the older guys are sitting at the bench, like just be like, hey, like, tell me how did you serve? Where did you serve? I've learned so many incredible things, both through Indianapolis and through everyday people that I meet that are wearing a service hat, Marine, veteran Marine or whatnot, especially in being in San Diego, that like have shown me what sacrifice really means. And we have it so easy. Like our lives are so easy today. And it's because of those people. And I think that if we don't take a second to value what our people that went before us and what they've learned from it and what they gave for us, that like, we don't value what we have. And so that's what all those hours of research, all that time together, it's like, that is what like stayed with me in my heart.
Yeah. That's so awesome. I love that. And you guys have done it again, because I'm going to do this really quick. I'm moving Indianapolis over here, and I want to talk about this that's coming out called The Dangerous Shore, how a motley crew of scientists, mobsters, double agents, retirees, volunteer pilots, and a Boy Scout stopped the invasion of America. So this is, again, another thousands of hours of documentation, research, cross-referencing. I think there's 80 pages of citation in here. I didn't really count. Is it about 80, Ben? Maybe more. 40 or whatever. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. So this is the next story you're telling. I shouldn't say story. This is the other. It's not a story. This is history. Yep. So what is the premise of this part of history that's gone untold?
That will take longer than Indianapolis to tell you.
I know it's probably it's a disservice to probably like say it in a couple of minutes, but if you were to try to just summarize, hey, Andy, here's what this book is you're going to learn about. This is about the Eastern Seaboard, and there being espionage happening along the coast of the United States.
Yes. Well, actually, all coasts, Gulf Coast, Pacific Coast, and East Coast, primarily East Coast. But we had hundreds of ships sunk within 5 miles of our shore during World War II. Most people don't realize that. Mostly merchant, but there were Navy vessels sunk by German submarines, by Japanese submarines. It was, our guys were called to war. They were either drafted, they were sent off to war, and who was left to fight? It was the people that couldn't go to war. So this was the too young, the too old, the minorities, women. These were the ones who were left to fight. So these are the story. It's the mafia. They actually defended our ports. They defended New York from, spies landing. It was double agent, German agents that turned, that helped us. It was women who would sell jam on the side of the road to pay for their own gas to fly airplane patrols. It was old World War I, like crusty veteran, our salty guys that would fly the submarine patrols, and the U-boats would see them and they'd be forced to dive. And that's why our ships would get through. And they bought America enough time because we didn't have enough force. We didn't have enough planes, ships, all of that to fight back. We were losing. We were getting our butts kicked for the first year and a half. And so it was these civilians.
But we don't admit that. Hold on. We don't publicly admit that. That's not a good thing to do as like the big guy in the yard, in the schoolyard.
But I think that what's so great about this is how relevant it is and how we were the underdog at that point. And how it was the everyday person that stood up and did the right thing and fought back. So whether it was the scientists who were inventing technology that never existed, like before computers, before calculators even, there were, these were the people breaking the German code before we had computers. They're breaking it by hand, like mathematically. And so all of these people played their part because they couldn't go to war, but we never talk about what the people did at home. And so this is all those, the motley crew of citizens that stood up and said, like, they're buying our military industry time to build the reinforcements and the ability, the technology to fight back. And that's why we won the war.
So how did this story come to your front door? And then you get tossed on your lap once again for you and Ben to go on this like excursion into the wild of research and historical documentation to learn all these things and compile all that.
Well, it started with one boat, and it wasn't even, actually, Eagle was a ship, not a boat, but it was little. It was a World War I sub chaser, and it was finished right after World War I, and they used it for patrols and rinky-dink things throughout, the inner warriors. And so the reason this story was brought to me, because the way that Eagle 56 was sunk was very similar to Indianapolis, and there was a huge injustice. And they're like, oh, Sara tells ship injustice stories.
We know someone who already did that once.
Let's do it again. And I read it, and it's an incredible story, but it wasn't enough for a book. And they're
on its own, it didn't have enough to be 500 and something pages.
Yes, not this behemoth. So, so the Eagle was great, but then there was a lot of, there wasn't a lot of information. There wasn't a lot of testimony of anything but how it sunk. There was a lot of missing. So I had to do a lot of research on finding what was happening in between. Turns out this little ship was involved with the first U-boat patrols. It was the first American ship lost in American waters. It was the ship that rescued the survivors of that, the Reuben James. I'm sorry, not the Jacob Jones. And so flash forward, it's the last American ship sunk in World War II.
Oh, wow.
And 3 miles off the coast.
Like end capping the whole thing. That's crazy.
And it sunk 3 miles off the coast of Maine. People saw it from land. They saw it happening.
No way.
Yes. And so that kind of came full circle. And as I'm researching and I'm finding all these little pieces and things, and I'm like, well, this is kind of connected, and this is kind of connected, and this is kind of connected. And next thing I know, I have a 500. It actually was 900 pages before the first cut. And my
Are you serious?
editor was like... And I had to cut it very, very harshly.
Do you still have a copy of that manuscript? I would actually read it. I would honestly read it. If you have a V2, Ben, or a V3, I'll take it. I'll take it, dude.
Director's cut. Yeah. So it was a lot of research. I think.
Oh, by the way, sorry, you're saying this, and I'm envisioning Sara in like your house with the meme of the guy like with the red string going, like the like,
yes.
Was that you like stringing all these things together?
And like, honestly,
but you found all these nuances that like if on the surface they're not there, but once you actually start figuring out more details and the time of this and the location of that, and then there's all these actual connection points that aren't not fabricated.
Right. There's nothing. I mean, it's 100% nonfiction. There's 1,100 citations in that thing.
That's 1,100?
That's more than writing the book.
That's crazy.
The book was great. The citation part sucked.
Remember when you're in school and you write a paper and they're like, no, you have to follow the MLA handbook. Like,
yes.
That's torture.
Yes. And so I don't even know how many thousands of pages I had to read. And to understand, like, that's all, there's code breaking, there's all that nuance to understanding the systems involved. Thankfully, I have an engineer husband who helped explain some of this to me. And so that was very wonderful. But there was a lot. And I have to say, like, God helped me keep this all organized because I don't know how I did it. It was all him. Jen knows she prayed with me through most of this. And so Yeah. And so the other thing I did too that I think is different in this book is that I wrote it in present tense. And that was really hard.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
You know, and so I only wanted the reader to know what the person knew at the time they knew it, to not have that hindsight and to have the like, oh, we shoulda.
Sure.
So you make different decisions in those moments. If this is all the information you have, if you're caught in a corner, if you're in this predicament, if you're trying to help your family survive, what would you do? It's different than knowing the outcome already.
Right. Knowing the end already. Yeah. And then looking back and armchair quarterbacking the whole thing.
Right. Knowing there's going to be an atomic bomb. Knowing those things they didn't know. They knew there was a serious threat, credible threat that was coming in, that New York was going to be attacked by submerged rockets. We had tons of intelligence on this. They decided thinking that was the situation. So they didn't know that that's not what Germany had, that German was their, technology and everything was kind of falling apart by the end of the war. But they had information there was going to be one last ditch effort. So that was kind of the whole thing, that all of this built together to come to this, April of 1945 with all these different characters and these storylines and this threat that was a credible threat. So yeah, it all came together. It was really hard. There's a lot of sources.
That's wild. That's so wild.
Yeah.
But I love that. Well, first of all, I haven't read this. You literally handed this to me when you walked in. So
I got the galleys this week. Yeah.
I cannot wait to read this. I'm so excited to see all like the intricacies of the story. But again, like that's also me piggybacking, having read like the Survivor story, and having this kind of early in advance as well, and reading that. So I'm privy to that. So I'm excited about it, but it's just fascinating to me that, you can go to school and be on the pre-med track, and now you're documenting military history that's not been collected or assembled in a way that shares like the full 360 capacity of the storyline. It's fascinating.
It's people story. I think that's what, that's what I've always been drawn to. And I think that's where, if I had been a doctor, maybe that's the part I would have been the kind that, gets in trouble for spending too much time with the patient. But it's like in the Indianapolis and in Dangerous Shore, I'm fascinated by people and what they would do and how they would react in these situations, and ask myself every time, what would I do? And I'd like to believe I'm a good guy, but you never know. If it's your family at stake, if it's your life at stake, and it's you or them, are you the person that says, okay, they will live and not me? That's tough,
I'm interested to see how you take that and then write that in the kind of the first person account of it being in, I'll say in real time. There's probably a better, what's the literary term for that? Not real time, not first person. Linear. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And telling it in that fashion versus kind of like the retrospect of the Indianapolis. Right. I'm excited about that.
And I tell from the German perspective. I go into the U-boats. I take a lot of firsthand accounts, letters, personal testimonies, so you're not just looking at this is America and we're amazing. You also see the really bad guys that existed in America and bad choices that were made. You see the Germans, you see good guys on the German side. You see the humanity of both. And again, it's a people story.
That's fascinating. So when does this come out? When does the public get this?
March 10th.
March 10th of 2026.
Yeah.
So March 10th, 2026, you can get this book in major booksellers, right? Like the Barnes and Nobles of the world and all those places and online. But there is a unique part of this story that actually is a connection point between you and Ben's families that you didn't know about, but you uncovered in the process of doing the research for this book. Tell me about that.
So one of the last Navy ship sunk in World War II was the Frederick C. Davis. And it turns out Ben's grandpa was on the Frederick C. Davis. And
he was assigned to that ship?
Yep. He was a sailor aboard that. He was a sonarman, I believe. Yeah. And so the prisoners of war that were captured. So they sink the Frederick Davis. Paul Eust is the name of the captain who sunk Frederick C. Davis. And all the men that got off, they sunk the Navy comes in, they sink his U-boat. They capture the prisoners of war of Germans. They bring them on the same ship with the survivors of the Davis, the rescue ship. So they're both on the same ship. And they take the prisoners of war to, the interrogation kind of camp sort of thing. What's super interesting about this is that through this whole storyline, I told you I talk about the German storyline and the rocket scientists who are developing the V2 and submerged rockets that are the impending threat for the American coastline. So the captain of the in theory at the time, they believed the captain of one of the ships carrying these submerged rockets was named Steinhoff. So Steinhoff, at the end of the war, surrenders. And you followed him the whole book. So you're learning about the V2 development. You're learning about all these, the German scientists developing the missiles and the rockets, submerged rockets. And, Steinhoff surrenders because the war is over. He's taken to the same interrogation camp as the captain of the U-boat that sunk the Davis. And he is telling, they're both being tortured. The interrogators are not following the Geneva Convention, and they're called out for this and whatnot. But so flash forward. So I'm not going to give away the big part of it, but, spoiler alert kind of thing. But in the roundabout way, so I find out that the captain of the U-boat, Paul Eust, actually became friends with my husband's grandpa after the war. So the captain of the U-boat that sunk the Frederick Davis becomes friends with the crew of the Davis. And then when they're in Idaho, when he came to San Diego to visit, Paul Eust came to San Diego to visit, he would stay at their house, or he would stay, in their guest house kind of thing. And so Ben and Ben's parents grew up with Paul Eust, the U-boat captain, telling them stories. What? And this is the same, guy who's...
And that's part of this story.
Yes.
That's nuts.
And so not only that, he was in the cell and hearing what was happening to this other captain from the Steinhoff and what really happens to him. And there's a whole thing that happens that was covered up. That you have to read in the book. But
oh my gosh.
I can't give away everything, but long story short, so I find out that my husband's tied to this story. And
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Ben's a legit engineer. I play math on TV. So the statistical impossibility of that is breaking my head right now.
Yeah.
It's got to be in the quadrillions. Can I say quadrillions? Is that an appropriate measurement in this case, Ben? Based on your your experience? Yeah, he says quadrillion sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah.
It must be right.
1 in 1 quadrillion chance that you guys would be married, and in your lifetime you'd be telling this story that has a family connection to. That's crazy.
And the fact that it came up in a weird way too, because I remember, every now and then I'd hear in passing about Ben's grandpa, because he had passed away before I met Ben.
Okay.
But he's, buried at Rosecrans, and we've gone and visited and whatnot. And so I knew kind of the Davis. I remember hearing the Davis over the ship, but it was so interesting the day when I'm reading this and I'm like, wait, Frederick Davis. Wait, why do I know that? And I'm putting these connect the dots together, and I'm like, Ben, what ship was your grandpa on? I'm like, wait a minute. And then I remember hearing stories about him hearing about another POW being tortured. And they're like, but no, in all the records, they say there was no torture of our POWs. And he's like, this guy, and then he wrote a book. And so I'm like, wait a minute. So I get this book and I'm putting the pieces together, and Paul Eust wrote a book in German. So I'm saying, I can speak German, but I don't read German books all that often.
Sure.
Nor do I know World War II U-boat German.
Right. Yeah, right.
That does not fly off the tongue.
Yeah.
So
not real familiar with that.
Reading this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this testimony, and it's lining up with the storyline I'm trying to tell. And it was just this crazy day of wait, Ben, what ship was your grandpa on again?
No way.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool to have that all come together. And then it was neat because Ben's family, who are all, San Diego natives, so they were, I'd get notes from his Uncle Dan, or, his Aunt Mary, or all these people that are I have this story and I have this story. And, one had the way that they found Paul Eust was was it Mary, right? That had, it was Mary who had she had a school assignment. And so she decided to reach out through Friends of Germany or something, this pen pal thing in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And so she sent a letter to him in Germany. And, that's how he came to the United States and met the family, and these reunions began. And it was
that is wild.
Wild story.
That is so wild.
So they all were kind of part of telling me this history, because they all had their own experiences with Paul Eust.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of this extra cool thing that I got to put in. And
oh my gosh.
And then there was another, this one is not as crazy, but it's still pretty cool, is my stepdad was a young kid growing up in Ocean City, Maryland. And one of the more well-known stories is of a U-boat that came in. So his family, they were from Greece. They were immigrants, and they came in and became citizens, and they started a bed and breakfast in Ocean City, Maryland, or like a cottages, beach cottages, whatnot. And they had U-boats. Like there was so many U-boats being sunk, the black oil would come on the sand. On shore, and he'd have to walk through it and stuff, and he talked about it. And so he was there when like this other major character in the story rented from his family's cabins and was there when the U-boat sunk the ship. And
what?
Yeah. And so
your stepfather is living real life in that time while all this is happening.
Yes. And he's like 9. So he's like kind of aware of what's going on, but also like not, you know, they were
but even
like,
if you become
Nazis.
But even if you become an adult and you look back at being 9 and you recall these things that at the time you didn't know what they were, and you go, oh, wait a minute, this, you can string things together. Like that's wild.
So he had part of the story too. So I got to put that in there and tie it into one of my other main characters who's in the storyline. Then he's throughout the war. And he's the one that was kind of in charge of all of the East Coast defense.
Wow.
And secret code break and Ultra and all that. So
that is so crazy. So, I cannot wait to read this story.
So, there's a lot going on.
And the other 400 pages that are missing.
Yes.
You should have like an author's cut, like the full.
I wish they would do that.
Yeah, it's okay.
It'll be my social media campaign.
Yeah, they'll deliver it on like a dolly. Have the UPS guy deliver it on a dolly. It's the heavy ass book. Yeah, exactly. This is fascinating. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this. I mean, I know it's a trek for you guys to come down here anyways, but it's really an honor to have you here on our show because, you know, we do finance and like that's kind of the thing that we do as a family business, but there's a lot of military history connected to our family, our extended family, and it's important. And so, you know, we have a lot of people on this show that do business and things like that, but I really wanted to highlight your work for preserving the true story of the USS Indianapolis. I'm not ashamed at all to put your book and like always make reference to it. And I'm glad that it's front and center in our studio here. It makes me super proud as a friend of yours and having known you for so long and becoming friends with Ben as well as Ben, Jen, and all of us have become friends together as couples. And I love walking in here and seeing your book proudly displayed. So thanks for doing all of this heavy lifting and hard work so that we can feature something that is very personal to us as well. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you think is worth noting that you wanted to share that maybe I didn't bring? Oh, there is something I just remembered. You mentioned that here at MCRD in San Diego, there's the pool. It's named after Indianapolis.
It's named the Captain Park or the Park Pool, Parke, and it was named because in World War II they didn't require you to be able to swim, and so when you went into the Navy, which is problematic, obviously now.
Looking back, seems like a little bit of an oversight.
I don't know. You know, I feel like they maybe saw it then. I don't know. Anyway, they named one of the true heroes of the story was Captain Park, and he gave his life really attending to the men in the water. He was the one, they said, with his big Marine voice, was calling the guys, gathering them, helping them to stay alive, and he lived to the 3rd day.
Oh,
and
wow.
So in honor of him as a Marine, you know, that he was one of the Marines aboard the ship, they named the pool after him, and they teach swimming lessons because of him.
Oh, wow.
And same thing with Great Lakes. They have a USS Indianapolis pool, and that's because of Indianapolis. So that actually
really?
changed their policy. Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah,
that's cool.
Anybody that goes through there will go through that pool and we'll see it. And, you know, I don't know how much they teach. Every now and then they'll have me come in and talk about it with the, you know, new recruits and whatnot. But, yeah, it changed policy because of that. Thankfully, that, and they changed the life jackets because they used to be rated for like 60, 70 hours. And they were in the water for like 100 hours. So.
I have to admit, like at the time, I mean, I can imagine going, yeah, you know what? 2.5 days seems like it's about the right time to be stuck in water and it'd be okay. You'll be rescued by then. Right. But unfortunately, that was just not the case. Like, I understand that. I'm glad that those things have changed for the better. And I also hope that no one ever has to experience a 60 or 70 or 100 hour wait in a life jacket in the middle of the ocean. That's scary. Yeah. That's real scary. That's real scary.
Yeah. I mean, even filming the documentary, we went out, we had to do a couple scenes in there to, you know, cut between the interviews. And so we went out to Blue Water and filmed life jacket cutaway scenes, anything like that. We didn't do real recreations. It's more just, you know, setting a scene. And the day we're going out there, we get a call over the radio that's like, there's hammerhead sharks in the water. And I was like, awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We're recreating almost the exact thing.
Yes. And so, we're out there like, okay. And there's a kelp bed, which is like, you don't want to really be swimming by the kelp bed. So you go a little further and
this seems safe.
Yeah, kind of. And so we're out there and, Ben is down, he's diving down to help me film, from down up. And so I'm out there and I was like, I want to see, like, what does it feel like? Because we couldn't see land. And so, even knowing the boat is behind me. And
I think there's something wrong with you too.
I know.
There's something wrong with you guys.
But I wanted to see, like, what if I could put myself in that, how that feels.
I get that.
And knowing there's a boat 50 feet from me and I'm a triathlete, like I can swim. But
it's swim, bike, and run.
Yes. I can swim and then, but to go out there, like, my gosh, did that mess with my head? Just putting myself there and thinking like, okay, it's deep. I can't see anything beneath me. I know there's sharks in the water. How fast can I swim? Not faster than a shark.
That's crazy.
And it was like 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah, no, but going through that mental exercise of like, oh, it would be like this, except for a really long multi-day time. That's scary.
To not know if rescue's coming. Because by day 3, they believed no one was coming.
Oh, it's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
So that was a wild, that was my little tiny step into that, what that felt like. And obviously hadn't gone through any of the previous trauma with it. So it still was enough to mess with you. And that was just a wild, wow, okay, this is unreal.
Well, Sara, I'm super proud of you. Like I said, I'm so grateful to be able to proudly display your book here, and I can't wait to put your new one on the shelf too. I will keep it under safeguard until March 10th, 2026. No one will get to see this. This will not see the light of day publicly until your book comes out, but I will read it this weekend because I'm excited to. So
excellent.
And thank you so much for coming by the studio to do this interview with me today. If you would like to connect with Sara, all of her contact information will be in the description box below, as well as links to the book, to the documentary on Amazon Prime if you want to watch that. And then when this book does come out, or in the pre-releases order, I'll come back and I'll put that in the link of the description box below. But Sara, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Ben, thank you so much for all your support, for all the variety of things you do and the roles you play to make all this work. I'm sure that it goes unrecognized by a lot of other people. Certainly recognized by her a lot, but most people don't know that you guys work a lot together behind the scenes. So in addition to your normal everyday life of saving the planet. So great job, Ben. Thank you, Sara, for coming by.
Thanks.
Thank you all for watching this episode of Friends of Mortgage Heroes. If this is your first time here to the channel, please remember to like the channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can find every single great interview every time we have a new one come out. And then if you're personally interested in the USS Indianapolis story, or this other story coming out, and the brand new one coming out, or military history, be sure to reach out, leave a comment, share this with somebody else who might have a personal connection to this story, or just find interest in it as a naval historian or any sort of military historian for United States history. So, Sara, thank you.
I got to add quick too. If you are a family member, if you're tied to USS Indianapolis and you want to connect with the group, USSIndianapolis.com. That's all you got to remember. So, we want all the family members to be involved.
Yeah. Thank you, Sara. I know that interviews are sometimes few and far between, but I am so glad to have you. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see you all with another great guest next week.